Early spring of the year 2012, Kungursky district of Primorsky Krai, the quiet village of Mohovoe, died out. The streets are shrouded in grave silence. No sound of children's laughter, nor sounds of ordinary rural life. Even the birds seemed quieter that day, as if nature itself was silently mourning its children. In the yard of the 4-story building stand 9 graves, lined up on ordinary benches. People are crowding around. Only a quiet sob and a hushed whisper can be heard. Even the oldest elders did not remember such a grief. On this day, mourning was declared throughout the Congo district of the Perm region. State flags were lowered. All entertainment events were cancelled. In the hands of school children, friends and classmates of the deceased, portraits with black mourning ribbons. Residents could not believe in this nightmare. Yesterday a family of 10 people lived here, and today only ashes, grief and tears are left. The tragedy that happened here has shaken all of Russia. As it turned out, the whole family lived in harsh conditions in a semi-basement room of 35 square meters with a single barred window. Why has no one helped them get out of the semi-basement hell into decent housing all these years? And the most important question, why did the tragedy happen? The small village of Mohovoe, with a population of about 2,000 inhabitants, is as ordinary as in the Russian outback. There is a school, a kindergarten, and a clinic here, several grocery stores, and even its own bakery. In the old club, dating back to Soviet times, holidays and discos are held. A few kilometers away flows the Babka River. It's pleasant to cool off in its cool water stream in the summer heat, and the kids happily catch small fish to their heart's content. There are many well-maintained 2-story houses left from Soviet times, and in the center of the village proudly stands a 4-story building, the only one in the whole village. It's designed unusually. Instead of a basement, on the ground floor there are small rooms of only 35 square meters each with access to a common corridor. Each of them has water supply and sewage. Earlier in the cities, such a layout was called a communal apartment. Only the toilet and kitchen were shared. Small windows are located right under the ceiling. Looking out of them, you can see the legs of passers-by on the sidewalk. It's cramped, but you can live. In Soviet times, they were provided to workers of the reinforced concrete products plant, waiting in line for a new apartment. Some received them happily and moved, others took the baton, settled in and also waited. But in the distant 1991, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics collapsed, and people still lived here, having given up hope of getting the promised living space from the state. Almost all the apartments were privatized, renovated, and continued to wait for better times. Abruptly, the district administration assigns a complete apartment under the resettlement program. But now they don't build new housing in the villages, and there's not enough money to buy their own, so they live as they are used to. It was exactly such a room that the plant allocated to the Shlyakov family, about whom the story will go. They moved to Mohovoe in 1999 from the Komi-Permiak Autonomous Okrug. The head of the family is Alexander, his wife Yulia, and 2 twin brothers Ivan, Andrei. Alexander was born in 1975 in the city of Kudymkar in a prosperous family with a good income. His father worked as a bulldozer operator and earned well. His mother worked all her life in the city dining room. The son never knew need, but he never received any education. After the army, he worked on a construction site, was, as they say, a simple worker, humble and shy. He was in good standing with the leadership and distinguished by those qualities that make a man a good family man. Julia was born in the village of Mohovoe. She was from a poor rural family, a modest, quiet and calm girl. She did not shine with beauty, but there was some inner light coming from her that was so appealing to all sincere and spiritual people. She grew up in the village and rarely went anywhere in her life. All her relatives did not cherish her soul, and she responded in kind. She helped around the house, looked after her younger brothers, while other girls her age were dancing at discos and meeting boys all the time. She struggled with her studies, having a hard time finishing school and pursuing further education. She adored children more than anything and dreamed of having a large, strong family since her own childhood. They met when Julia was visiting Alexander's distant relatives in his hometown. They couldn't have been a better match for each other. Both understood that fate had brought them together. He suggested she move in with him, as his parents had a spacious apartment and he had a good steady job. Her situation was difficult, living with her mother, father, and 2 younger brothers who still needed to be raised. Soon she moved in with him, and a year later they had twins. The young couple was happy, but Alexander's parents were not too pleased with their son's choice. They hoped that his wife would be financially secure, educated, and preferably not from the province. Julia, being naturally shy and reserved, did not meet their expectations at all. Even the birth of their twin grandsons could not reconcile them with their son's choice. Alexander was deeply distressed, seeing how his wife silently endured the reproaches and harshness of his parents. On the contrary, Yulia's parents were very kind to him and accepted him as their own. And during the next trip to visit Yulia's family, they decided to move to the Perm region, to Yulia's native village. Alexander quickly found a job at a reinforced concrete factory that needed workers. Valentin and Edward Sudilovsky's parents and Yulia's 2 brothers welcomed them warmly. How do all the simple and open people behave in the village? And at first, everything was good. The head of the family got a job at the reinforced concrete plant, while Yulia got a job as a postwoman. And while there were 4 of them, there was enough room for everyone in the small chocolate box apartment. A shabby repair, old furniture, an electric stove. They didn't crave for luxury, they valued what they had. Then one by one, children started to be born: Sasha, Kolya, Denis, Evgeny. The woman couldn't believe that her childhood dreams were coming true. Her husband shared the joy, but was surprised that there was not a single girl. And as if hearing his words, the heavens sent them 2 daughters one after another, Nastya and Uliana. The total number of children in the family became 8. Interestingly, Alexander's parents never reconciled with his choice. They didn't visit, didn't invite him over, and didn't provide any material help. The villagers were surprised by the family's large number of children, as they required food, clothing, and education. And the living space for such a family should be much larger. All children are from God, said Alexander, but it was up to him to feed and take care of them. The woman's body, weakened from constant childbirth, could no longer cope with hard work. After all, almost every day she had to walk 15 to 20 kilometers on foot. She had to devote herself exclusively to the house and children. The life of the family, with such success starting in a new place, began to deteriorate day by day. The plant was passed from hand to hand until it was closed, and Alexander, like many villagers, was left without a job. Occasional jobs, as well as Denis's disability benefits. After suffering from meningitis in childhood, the boy stopped hearing, couldn't feed a large family, lived in agony, terrible living conditions. Now, 9 people were crammed into 35 square meters, while the standard is 1 person per 12 square meters. At 3.5. 30-year-old Andrei took his grandmother and grandfather into his 3-room apartment. Due to intracranial pressure and constant headaches, he was forced to live separately from his brothers and sisters. This subsequently saved his life. From constant stress and lack of money, Alexander began to drink. At first only on weekends, then on weekdays too. Alcohol helped to forget, but did not solve the essence of the problem. Julia endured for a long time, tried to reason with her husband. Acquaintances said that the spouses often quarreled, as sometimes there was not even enough money for groceries, and alcohol significantly cut the family budget. Conflicts arose more and more often, shouts and curses. The children were forced to spend the night at their grandmother's, so that the parents could calm down and make peace, but soon everything repeated. And in a small village, you can't hide anything from people. In 2006, the family attracted the attention of Child Protective Services, and as a result of the inspections, they were classified as being in a socially dangerous position. Social workers from the district repeatedly visited, documented violations, talked and left with a clear conscience and a heap of filled papers. The work is done, the family is under control, the parents receive all the stipulated payments for the children, but the apartment is unsanitary. The father is consuming alcohol. We will raise the issue of child removal, said in the Social Protection Department. But clearly, there was not enough income to provide the family with even the most necessary things. And often from such families where alcohol is consumed and scandals often occur, children are taken to an orphanage and parents are deprived of their parental rights. Child protection services frequently threatened Yulia, saying they would take her children away because she had too many and couldn't provide for them. But she doesn't drink. The children were normal, good, beautiful. So, it turns out, you have to take children away from large families, give them to strangers, and give them 10,000 for each child or more. And why not give it to this family, where they are native, mother with father? Mother Valentina Sudilovskih painfully recalls Vadim Maltsev, who took over as head of the Mohovoe settlement. Once he came to them in the evening, knocked. I come in and I can't believe my eyes. As they used to say in the old days, 7 on the beds, but there are not even beds. Children's things are scattered around the room in a mess. There is 1 table from the furniture and 2 chairs. There is no bed to mention. The boys sleep on floor mattresses side by side, and Sasha, having sneaked out, smokes right in the room. I scolded him good and proper, told him I'd go to the district administration after the weekend, find some money, help with furniture and repairs. And if I see him drunk again, I'll bring the police myself and take the kids to the orphanage. Vadim Nikolaevich Maltsev kept his promise. He got money from the district administration, with which they made a modest repair in the apartment, bought furniture and the most necessary household appliances. According to him, Alexandra is taken to work at the bakery. The salary is small, but there will always be food for the children. Now there could be no talk of drunkenness. The local residents also did not stand aside. They collected children's clothes, food, and items of first necessity, which became a huge support for the family. In school and kindergarten, the kids are fed for free, and for the little one, Denis Maltsev, they arrange an annual visit to a boarding house for disabled children. To arrange and receive all the entitled benefits, one needs to constantly go and ask, knocking on the doors of administrations and funds. Many large families simply do not have the time and strength to do this, and many quiet and modest ones, like our Julia and Alexander, also have patience and determination. But the large family was still able to get out of the difficult situation and prove to the social protection and guardianship authorities that they can raise and provide for their children. In 2010, they are removed from the standard operating procedure category, but just in case they are left in the risk group. Stable income and the help of fellow villagers became a lifesaver for the Shlyakovs. The kids were always dressed poorly, but clean and neat, and they didn't misbehave in the yards. They greeted, always smiled, and lived friendly. They didn't offend the little ones. They were only very embarrassed when they were brought second-hand children's clothes to help. The older ones already understood, they remembered, recalls the neighbor who lived a floor above, Olga Blinova. They attended school and kindergarten, performing adequately but not exceptionally, and tried to study well if the children had to do their homework at one table in turns. And they had to help their mother, take care of the younger ones, and do the housework. To improve the living conditions, Vadim Maltsev suggests Alexandra to privatize the semi-basement apartment and adding to its cost Yulia's maternity capital. To buy a house where the family could live comfortably and spaciously, recalls grandmother Valentina Sudilovskaya. With our maternity capital, we could only buy a small house with stove heating, without sewage and water supply, and it's not clear how far away. They were offered such a house, but everything there is old. It needs repairs, and firewood for the winter needs to be brought in. But here is a well-appointed apartment, and it was close to Sasha's work, and the school and kindergarten were nearby, so they didn't move. I offered them to swap apartments, but they objected, saying they couldn't send us, the old folks, to the basement, so they didn't agree to any. The Shlyakovs didn't have money for another well-appointed and spacious dwelling. On March 8, 2022, the village of Mohovoe, like the rest of the country, celebrated with great fanfare. The youth were out late, the older generation was having fun at home, covering festive tables, congratulating the beautiful half of humanity with flowers and gifts on Women's Day. There was no money for flowers, and Alexander asked to bake a loaf at work, decorating it with roses made of dough. And a gift for the wife, and the kids will be fed. He also celebrated but barely drank. He needs to be fit for his early shift tomorrow morning. He greatly valued his job as life was improving and a raise was coming soon. If only he knew that this evening with his family would be the last. Early in the morning of March 9th, thick black smoke poured out of the basement apartment window on Builders Street. The first call came into the fire department at 8:15. The worried neighbors across the street made an emergency call. People poured out of the surrounding houses. Everyone understood that a great misfortune had come, and the only way to cope was to stick together. Firefighters arrived from the Nagorny village, which is 4 kilometers away from Mohovoe, very quickly. 4 fire trucks immediately went out and put out the fire, in a matter of minutes. People looked in horror at the still smoking window. "Yulka is always at home with the little ones in the morning," screamed the old woman in a hastily thrown-on old coat. People from all over the village flocked and, approaching, stood as if rooted to the spot. Curiosity turned into horror. Everyone understood whose apartment had just burned down to the ground. When the firefighters entered the charred building, a terrifying scene unfolded before them. In the small room among the burnt things, 9 bodies of adults and children were scattered haphazardly. They were almost unburned. The unfortunate ones suffocated from the poisonous smoke from the furniture, rags, and foam mattresses. The children were sleeping on them, as there was simply no room for beds in the room. Household items, burning in the hallway, not only emitted a choking smoke, they cut off the last chance of rescue. I've seen a lot at fires, but every time I remember this one, tears well up, admits Vladislav, who participated in the extinguishing. I've never seen anything like it before or since. Bodies were scattered around the room among piles of debris, an old television, and charred furniture. There was a grate on the only small window. They lived here as if in a prison. The youngest was only 3. They say that Nastya, who was 6, could still talk and mumble something, but what exactly it was is no longer discernible. Her strength waned and they failed to save her. 6 square meters of fire in the corridor became a deadly trap for the entire family. Fire and carbon monoxide left no chance for life. The 34-year-old head of the family, Alexander Shlyakov, his wife Yulia, and their 7 children, Ivan, who was 13, Sasha, who was 11, Kolya, who was 10, Denis, who was 8, Zhenya, who was 7, and 2 daughters, Nastya, who was 6, and Uliana, who was 3. 14-year-old Andrei, Ivan's twin brother, was the sole miraculous survivor. Firefighters silently carried out bodies covered with blankets and carefully laid them straight onto the snow, scorched by the fire. The crowd around remained, huddling in a circle around the evil-smelling entrance. Nearby, Yulia's mother, Valentina Sudilovsky, wept uncontrollably. The father stayed in the apartment, his heart gave out. Later, both of them will collapse from unbearable grief and spend more than a month in the hospital. The paramedics arrived, but their help was no longer needed. One after another, the cars of the head of the Mohovskoy settlement, Vadim Maltsev, and the head of the Kungursky district, Vadim Lisanov, arrived. The crowd surrounded them and angrily blamed them for the incident. The bureaucrats, indifferent to the villagers, were the most ruthless. And only when the head of the GU Ministry of Civil Defense, Emergencies and Disaster Relief in the Perm region, Oleg Popov, intervened, promising a comprehensive and immediate investigation and clarification of the causes of the incident, did people calm down a bit. A team of experienced investigators, criminologists, a fire safety expert, and forensic doctors from Perm arrived at the scene, led by the head of the first department for investigating high-profile cases. Classes were cancelled at the Mohovskaya school, where the investigation headquarters for the emergency was located. Within half an hour, the investigators were already questioning the neighbors and eyewitnesses of the terrible tragedy. Olga Blinova, who lived directly above the ill-fated apartment, said, "At the beginning of the 9th, I heard Yulia's screams. What have you done?" Initially, I dismissed the thuds and screams from furniture and children, assuming the people were just drunk. But when, after about 5 minutes, I smelled smoke and saw it billowing past the window, I realized something was wrong and ran to the phone. I called, but they said the firefighters had already left, so people noticed the fire before me. Another neighbor, Denis Nezmianov, saw Shlyakin descend the ladder into his basement. I went to the balcony to smoke and saw smoke coming from Sasha's window. I stood there, not even smoking, watching as Sasha ran home and plunged straight into the smoke, disappearing. I never saw him alive again. The fire's origin was immediately suspicious, as it clearly did not start naturally. Experts confirmed there were no heaters in the apartment, the wiring was correct, and household appliances were also not the cause of the fire. It's a case of deliberate arson. But who and why did this? There were several versions. And the most shocking thought was that the father of the family could have resorted to arson due to extreme poverty. He admitted more than once that poverty had become unbearable, and he didn't want to live like this anymore. But Alexander's colleagues refuted this. Surveillance cameras confirmed he had been at work since 4 ante Meridium on the day of the fire. And when his neighbors called him about what had happened while he was still in his work uniform, he rushed home, trying to save his loved ones. Based on the position of the bodies, experts concluded that the man broke into the room and threw himself at the children, obviously trying to get them out of the room engulfed in flames. But the high concentration of carbon monoxide and toxic combustion products didn't allow him to do so. Losing consciousness, he died from suffocation. Neighbors also verified the conclusions were inconsistent. Sometimes they would argue, but who doesn't argue, says Lyubov Zueva, a neighbor in the house. It happened that Sasha would drink, they would argue, but to commit such a sin, no. Someone here said that he locked them up. That's nonsense, they didn't even lock the doors. What to take from them? On the contrary, we brought them everything we had, helped as neighbors. The woman turns away, unable to hold back tears, and those standing nearby sadly nod. So it was. Some abandon their wives and children, and in the best conditions they go into vagrancy, get drunk and wander. Alexander A. was not such a man. They also considered the possibility of a fire from an unextinguished cigarette, which Julia could have smoked in bed after drinking. But a forensic examination at the opening showed that the woman had not been drinking that morning. Moreover, it turned out that she was pregnant again, this time with twins, just like the first time. The term was short and she didn't have time to register it. The story of the woman's ritual self-immolation with her children was not verified. The Shlyakov family was poor, that's why they had children they didn't save, and according to the old saying, God gives a hair, he will give and a spoon. Her relatives who knew her confirmed that they never participated in any radical sects or beliefs. There is another version about the negligence of children with matches. In the corridor, investigators found a pile of old burnt rags. It all started with them, this horror. Right at the entrance was a washing machine, and possibly the pile of clothes was prepared for washing. There were a lot of clothes hanging in the hallway, and matches or a lighter in the house where both parents smoked were always in sight. But why couldn't the family leave the apartment when the fire started? When the children saw the fire, they were very scared and ran deep into the room. And the mother didn't panic right away, but after inhaling the poisonous smoke, she weakened and, losing coordination, could no longer make her way through the burning corridor. The only window that could save lives was covered with a grid. The small room quickly filled with thick smoke, from which people could no longer escape from the basement. The unexpected arson version was later fully confirmed by Vitaly Ignatenko, head of the Kungur Inter-District Investigative Department of the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation. During the investigation of the fire in the village of Mohovoe, it was established that the fire started from the corridor, as a result of which, to everyone's horror, 9 people died, 7 children and 2 adults. We completely rule out the version of the deliberate arson of the family's apartment due to numerous testimonies of neighbors and eyewitnesses, as well as after studying the video recordings of surveillance cameras installed in the bakery. Many villagers were dissatisfied with the official conclusions and the result of the criminal case, as not a single one of the administration officials was punished, and no one was even removed from their post. The next morning, residents spontaneously gathered in the village council courtyard, demanding meetings with authority representatives. Among the protesters were all the residents of the collapsed house on Construction Street 12. The head of the village, coming out to the people, said that he sincerely shares the grief of the relatives and friends of the deceased, and also feeling personally responsible for what happened, is ready to ensure the provision of housing to the remaining residents of the collapsed house as required by law. Knowing his involvement in the fate of the Shlyakovs and the relentless help he provided, people gradually calmed down and, having let off steam, began to disperse. Journalists from state media, who were at the scene of the incident, also began their investigation into the resonant case. Their main question was why a large family living for many years in such cramped, inhuman conditions did not receive the living space they were entitled to. After all, if all the laws of the housing code of the Russian Federation were observed, the tragedy would not have happened. Tells the deputy director of the Kungur newspaper, Lyudmila Petilova. The family lived in a municipal room belonging to the Kungur District Housing Fund. They were in line for resettlement, but the administration had no free housing and no new ones were being built. Over the years, the family has accumulated communal debts of 100,000, and with debts, they would definitely be refused in privatization. But even if the Shlyakovs had privatized the premises and, adding the maternity capital, they would not have been able to buy anything. Apartments in multi-story buildings were not affordable, and there was no desire to take a half-ruined house with stove heating and without water. Firewood is costly, and the family would freeze in winter without it. They were not in line for the young family program. Why? Didn't they have time to gather and process a bunch of necessary documents? The Kungur prosecutor's office sent us the Mohovoe fire investigation results. Conclusion: the premises where the fire occurred could not be used for living. It did not meet sanitary and epidemiological conditions. The standard area per person was also not observed. In other words, people could not live there, and the resettlement should have been carried out by the state within the deadlines clearly defined by law. Officials claimed that there are more than 600 such families in the district, and it is impossible to provide housing for everyone. They have to wait their turn. Other families also reside in that basement. They are ordinary people who have worked for years, some spending their entire lives at the factory waiting for apartments. The factory was sold long ago, yet people still reside in the basement. The service organizations only increase the rent for the apartment and do nothing. No one takes responsibility for these premises. Even the administration of the Kungur district shrugs it off, saying that this object is not on their balance. Even after what happened, they are not promised to be relocated from the cells of the trap because there is simply no free housing. The sole surviving child, Andrei Shlyakov, was cared for by his grandparents but took a long time to recover from the tragedy. He closed up, stopped going to school, stopped communicating with his peers. Only the help of psychologists helped him regain his mental balance and faith in the future. By the decision of the governor of the Perm region, Oleg Cherkunov, he was allocated 100,000 rubles from the Regional Reserve Fund, but no money can replace the boy who lost his family. For several days, not a single smile could be seen on the faces of the villagers. Even the tough men held back tears when talking about the fire victims. The organization of the funeral and memorial dinner was completely taken over by the regional administration. The family was buried in one grave at the cemetery of the Sylvan village, which is 5 kilometers away from the Mohovoe village. People walked along Martovskaya Rasputitsa on foot, men, elders, women went to see them off on their last journey. 8 pallbearers approached the half-day. They carried out the coffins in front of a crowd of people. Only one with Alexander was closed. He was severely burned during the fire. The farewell was long. People came up in turn, laid flowers, stroked the children's heads, and turning away, left, unable to hold back tears. Meanwhile, a not very tall, well-dressed woman and a full grey-haired, but still quite sturdy man came out of the car that had driven up and stopped nearby. They were not locals, and judging by everything, they came from far away. With a large bouquet of red carnations in their hands, they made their way through the crowd of people closer to Alexander's grave. Tears streamed down the stranger's face. It felt like they hadn't dried for a long time. Having waited their turn, they stopped, unhurriedly placed the bouquet of flowers at the foot of the grave. "Forgive us, granddaughter. Forgive Sasha. Forgive Yulenka," sobbing, the woman repeated quietly. In her eyes was such unbearable pain that it became clear she was not just an acquaintance to the deceased family. No one noticed how they got back into the car and left, and only a few standing nearby understood. But what to say and discuss now? You can't bring back the past. The priest Father Vasily sang for the deceased family. Tears glistened in his eyes as he listed the names of the deceased. Perhaps this ancient burial ground has never seen so much pain, burning and tears at once. 9 photographs with names managed to fit on a simple wooden cross. The commemorations went on in the school dining hall until late evening. The cooks, who had been preparing since early morning, were exhausted, but no one left their shift to go home earlier than when lunch ended. Later, Andrei Shlyakov said that in the evening they knocked on the door of the apartment where he lived. Upon opening, he saw an unfamiliar woman and man, and not immediately understanding who they were, he did not let them in. After all, his grandparents were in the hospital. He was home alone. Then the woman handed him a bundle, and crying said, "Take the grandson, we are very guilty before you." In the bundle were money and a gold cross. It's too late for goodness, it seems like a penance. And at the scene of the tragedy, a poetic memorial arose. People silently brought flowers, children's toys, lit candles in memory of that terrible spring morning. There were as many toys as the children never had in life. Many years have passed since then. Fresh flowers and toys are always lying on the grave of 7. The villagers remember them, and just as many years ago, 7 Mohovchan live in the basement on the ground floor. In the same place where one room is closed with a heavy steel door and a small window is tightly closed. In it, not only the surviving Andrei could not have survived, but anyone else. And you want to ask, looking into the eyes of the officials, how many more such cases must occur for all the many poor but orderly families to start getting decent housing? And what do you think about this story? Write in the comments, subscribe to the Telegram channel, there is additional content coming out. Moreover, if YouTube finally blocks it, we'll see each other there.